Okay, well, good morning. My name is Rocky Moretti. Moretti is spelled Moretti, and I'm the Director of Policy and Research with TRIP. TRIP is a transportation nonprofit research organization. We're based in Washington, D.C. We're supported by a coalition of transportation organizations who support us as advocates for an efficient, well-maintained, and safe transportation system. The report we're doing today in North Carolina is based on an analysis of the latest data at the federal, state, and local level in terms of the condition of the transportation system and also its impact on the economy and on traffic safety and traffic congestion. And in this event this morning, we'll be looking specifically at the Charlotte area as well as the Triad area of North Carolina. Now the key findings of the report. We found that North Carolina is one of the fastest growing states in the country. Since 2000, vehicle travel is up 37% in North Carolina. That's the fifth highest rate of growth in the country. Obviously, last winter when the pandemic hit, it had a significant impact on vehicle travel across the country. In North Carolina, we saw by April, vehicle travel was 38% lower than the previous April of 2019. But by October, vehicle travel in North Carolina was back within 4% of the previous October. And so we're seeing the recovery in terms of activity, personal as well as economic. But we also are finding that as North Carolina returns to growth in vehicle travel and is addressing significant ongoing and long-term growth, that the current investment in its transportation system is inadequate. A statewide panel, the NC First Commission, reported earlier this month that the state's annual $5 billion investment in its transportation system is approximately $2 billion lower the level that's needed to support economic growth, keep people safe, and keep the system in good condition. The TRIP report found that the lack of adequate maintenance of the transportation system, which results in rough roads, the level of traffic congestion, and the cost of serious traffic crashes to the consumer in North Carolina is approximately $10.3 billion annually. The TRIP report found that motorists in the Charlotte area are spending an additional $1,976 annually in the cost of driving on rough roads, which is beating up their vehicle, the cost of delays and wasted fuel due to traffic congestion, and the cost of serious and fatal traffic crashes when a lack of adequate roadway safety features were a contributing factor. The TRIP report found that in the Triad area, the average motorist is spending an additional $1,394 annually in the cost of driving on rough roads, which is beating up their vehicles, the cost of delays and wasted fuel due to traffic congestion, and the economic cost of serious and fatal traffic crashes in which the lack of adequate roadway safety features were a contributing factor. We also took a look at the condition of the system. The TRIP report found that in the Charlotte area, 23% of major roads have pavements in poor condition and 25% are in mediocre condition. The TRIP report also found that in the Triad area, 16% of major roads have pavement in poor condition and another 25% are in mediocre condition. We also looked at bridges. The TRIP report found that in the Charlotte area, 6% of bridges are currently rated structurally deficient and are in immediate need of repair. The report found that in the Triad area, 9% of the region's bridges are rated structurally deficient and are in need of immediate repair. As we see vehicle travel across the state returning to pre-pandemic levels, and as we look hopefully to getting through this pandemic over the next several months and anticipating significant increases in vehicle travel again, the TRIP report finds that in the Charlotte area, on average, motorists are spending an additional 48 hours annually stuck in traffic. This is additional time that people would be free to do the things they want to do the most, as opposed to being stuck in traffic. The TRIP report found that in the Triad area, the average motorist is spending an additional 28 hours annually stuck in traffic due to the high levels of traffic congestion. We point out in the report that roadway safety is very much impacted by the condition of the transportation system. The level of roadway safety features have a significant impact on people's safety out on the roads. And I think all of us would like to think that our roadways are as safe as they possibly could be. The TRIP report found that over the last 5 years, on average, 205 people are killed annually in vehicle traffic crashes in the Charlotte area. The TRIP report found that in the Triad area, on average, 151 people annually are being killed in vehicle traffic crashes. We know that there's a variety of roadway safety improvements that can be made, from adding rumble strips to improving lane markings to paving shoulders to improving facilities for bicyclists and pedestrians. All of these can have a significant impact on improving traffic safety. And as the report points out, annually, $672 billion worth of goods are being shipped on North Carolina's transportation system, most of it by roads. And by 2045, the value of those goods are anticipated to approximately double. So we're going to see continued increases in freight travel. And as we've seen during the pandemic, the quality of the state's supply chain is absolutely vital to the quality of people's lives and ability for businesses to operate efficiently. The report also points out that improvements to our roads and bridges have a significant impact on job creation. Annually, North Carolina's investments in its transportation system are creating or supporting approximately 110,000 jobs annually, and approximately nearly 2 million jobs in North Carolina are directly tied to the health or the quality of the transportation system in fields like agriculture, tourism, and manufacturing. So the quality of the state's transportation system is vital. That's why a recent report from the North Carolina Chamber and North Carolina State University found that businesses were adding jobs at a rate approximately 3 times greater when it was near where there had been recent improvements to the highways in that area. So in conclusion, we point out in the report that clearly significant increases in transportation funding are necessary at the local, state, and federal level. At the federal level, the current surface transportation program that North Carolina receives approximately $1.1 billion annually for transportation improvements is set to expire at the end of October. Clearly, there is hope with the new administration and the new Congress that as they look at recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, that additional stimulus funding for transportation and a long-term authorization of a federal program that's reliably funded is absolutely critical. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Jerry Cook. Jerry is the Vice President of Government and Trade Relations with Hainesborough Incorporated and is also involved in numerous transportation efforts in the North Carolina area. Jerry?
Sure. Thanks, Rocky. Thanks for the detailed breakdown of the North Carolina transportation by the numbers report. This report really speaks to the high cost of inadequate transportation infrastructure and investments for the average North Carolinian. As Rocky said, I am Jerry Cook, and I am the Vice President of Government Trade Relations, an active member of the North Carolina Chamber, sit on the Port Authority. I have my customs broker's license and have worked for easily 15, 25 years of working, trying to improve the transportation system, particularly highways, bridges, and roads in North Carolina. As this report highlights, the cost of inaction of our transportation problems are growing with each passing year and for North Carolina residents. Motorists in the Charlotte region are paying the highest transportation related cost in the state, nearly $2,000 in unnecessary additional costs per year. Meanwhile, here in the Triad, where my company's headquartered, we're seeing some of the worst traffic fatality rates and the highest accident-related cost of anyone in the full state. It's become clear the old solutions like the motor fuels tax have quickly become insufficient to serve the future needs of funding North Carolina's needs. What our state needs is a more sustainable, more robust, and modernized approach to transportation funding. And the COVID-19 pandemic has only accentuated this and made it imperative. Right now, people across the state are facing unprecedented hardships. Strong investments in our transportation and infrastructure will be key to our economic recovery. Included in this is adequate transportation investments will not only help the residents of the Triad where I live and work, but also the Charlotte region by bringing those transportation related costs back under control and in line, but they will also help significantly with the region and our entire state by growing jobs and creating an economic opportunity in all the communities across North Carolina. At this critical and pivotal moment, our elected leaders have this unique opportunity to enact bold transportation solutions during the 2021 legislative session. And our company here has been working hard through the other organizations like the Chamber and the Coalition aimed at encouraging the leadership to meet this opportunity head on. And we call ourselves the Destination 2030 Coalition. This alliance of business and trade association, local chambers of commerce, and other growth-minded organization was launched last year by the North Carolina Chamber, the state's leading advocate for the broad-based business community. The coalition's purpose is pretty simple: give job creators a forum to share creative solutions to our transportation challenges and focus voice to move those solutions forward in the public in a consensus process. Since this past summer, I've represented our organization in conversation with the members of the Destination 2030 Coalition as we've discussed our state's transportation challenges. We've been hopeful that our efforts will be fueled by a broader awareness of the challenges and the need to address these issues among the business community, as we have made substantial progress on this goal, as more than over 100 organizations have now joined the coalition from across multiple industries and multiple sectors in the state. The members of the coalition have put a number of ideas on the table to begin phasing out the motor fuels tax and creating sustainable streams of transportation. We've been using resources like the North Carolina First Commission's report, as well as other reports that have been released this year in the North Carolina Chamber Foundation to help guide our discussion and thoughts. Ideas like a more competitive highway use tax, a mileage-based tax, or just some of reallocating the cost and raising revenue for the purposes of transportation, and they're all on the table. The bottom line, however, is that we need to act now, and we must act to build a more sustainable transportation funding stream here in North Carolina, or we'll see costs, likely those highlighted in the report, to continue to increase and decrease business productivity. In this presentation, Rocky specifically mentioned the 110,000 full-time jobs directly related to design, construction, and maintenance of transportation infrastructure, but also the 1.9 million full-time jobs that are directly dependent upon this network being operational. I would argue that the vast majority of North Carolina jobs are all tied to transportation in some way. A stronger commitment to transportation investment and a successful delivery of the funding and the programs will undoubtedly have positive impacts across the entire economy of this state. Those of us on the Destination 2030 Coalition stand ready to assist our state, our elected leaders, and fellow businessmen and women in identifying and activating solutions that will help us secure a stronger transportation future here in North Carolina. This is simply an opportunity we cannot afford to pass on. With that, Rocky, I'll turn it back over for the Q&A portion of the event.
Yes, thank you, Jerry. And I'm sorry, I failed to say it in my initial comments that we do have a feature for you to indicate if you have any questions, and then Carolyn will go ahead and elevate you to a panelist status so we can get a look at you, and you can turn on your mic and ask any questions of myself or Jerry. Carolyn, are there any questions yet, or I had a question that if not?
I don't see any questions right now, but as Rocky noted,
Sure.
if there are any questions for the panelists, you can either enter those in the chat box, or you can raise your hand to indicate that you have a question. I see a question from Daniel Pierce with Fox 8 News. So Daniel, I'll elevate you to a presenter. So Daniel, if you unmute your microphone, you should be able to ask your question.
Perfect. Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to share this information with us. Looking at the triad where we're based out of, whenever this report was being made, does it go into specifics of, okay, whenever we're looking at our bridges or our roads, which ones have poor infrastructure, which ones need to really be looked at a lot more closely?
Well, in terms of the overall report, we're looking at cumulative data. So certainly the share of bridges. The bridges are all bridges over 20 feet. And when bridges are structurally deficient, they're also sometimes restricted to carrying lighter weight vehicles. So and if you do need to get at some of those individual bridges, if you get back to us, we could try and help identify some of those. The pavement conditions are essentially on all roadways other than local roads. And so that would be essentially everything once you've left your neighborhood. Once you're on a street with traffic lights and major roads, and those are the roads that everyone are driving on. And that data is based on annually, each state transportation department has to have each of those measured for essentially roughness, and they do that by driving vehicles over the roads, and the more there's bumps and vibrations, they know those are roads. Oftentimes the problems are on the surface, and the motorist notices it, but typically it often reflects sub-base or more structural problems with the pavements, and that's part of the challenge state and local governments are facing, that simple repavings are not as effective as they once were. And more long-term repairs are going to be needed, but of course those cost additional funding.
And real quick too, all these numbers flowing out there, what happens next? What can North Carolinians and what could people here in the Triad expect to address this, to decrease, I should say, the amount of time that they're stuck in traffic per year, or again, really impact their wallet, that they're not going to be spending nearly $1,400 per year due to the wear and tear on their car due to these roads that are not sufficient enough?
Sure, and I think I'll also, Jerry may also want to address this question at all, but what we're seeing is that when state and local transportation agencies don't have adequate resources, they essentially triage the funding they do have. And so some of the repairs that are necessary are not being made. And that's when you see poor pavement conditions, which obviously are costing the public more money in operating costs. In terms of traffic safety, AAA recently did a national report that found if just simple cost-effective safety improvements were made across the country, it would save about 3,200 lives a year. And so, again, transportation agencies know what needs to be done. The challenge is finding the resources. Similarly, when you look at traffic congestion, most of the improvements that are being made across the country increasingly are fairly modest projects, adding turn lanes or double turn lanes at busy intersections, really making smaller adjustments and repairs to the system. And again, certainly that can be done, but really for that to happen, you really need a long-term transportation program that's sustainably funded and matches up with those needs. So, Jerry, perhaps you could address that at the North Carolina level, at the state level.
Sure. I would say, the short answer is to get and participate. And one of the things that the North Carolina Chamber does a great job, and that is to bring, like the Destination 2030, to bring in as many people and organization as possible. As Rocky said very well, we know what's needed. The question is how to get there and how to bring that need faster, bring the capacity on faster. And so to work together to deliver that, find the funding, and set the priority. And the other, which one of the great things that the state has done, but we just need to continue to move it forward, was the state transportation initiative program that sets the prioritization so people can see which projects, where are they, and then deliver them faster. And I think that's probably the most important thing right now, is for people from all over the state to become active, work together, help find the funding, and really deliver this backlog of list and maintenance as fast as we can to get the capacity in. A good example in the area is the work that's going on I-74. That is going to provide a tremendous amount of resource that's needed in the Triad area for moving transportation. You see in the Kernersville, Guilford County, Forsyth area, the amount of just transportation, distribution related e-commerce. A lot of great new jobs are coming in, but the hamstring event to all of this is highway capacity and congestion.
Carolyn, are there any additional questions?
We've got one other question from Denise Hallett. Denise, I've elevated you to a presenter. If you unmute your line, you'll be able to ask your question of Jerry and Rocky. Go right ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, listen, thank you so much for the report, and thanks to the Chamber for helping and other businesses for helping fund this important research. I have a question around how you looked at the safety issues that relate to costs and inadequate conditions of the roadway. Do you look at things like width of pavement or travel lanes that are not adequate to carry the traffic? Do you drill down that far, or do you just look at traffic incidents and causes?
Sure. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration every couple of years does an analysis across the country and also state by state, where they estimate, based on current fatality rates and serious traffic crashes, what the economic costs are of those crashes. Now, it starts with property, but the higher costs obviously are medical, lost productivity. Unfortunately, if we lose someone, and of course, we all know the emotional costs are a million times higher than the economic cost, but it is helpful because it does monetize those costs. And then we know that a variety of research has established that the level of roadway safety features are a contributing factor in about a third of serious traffic crashes. Again, it doesn't mean that the lack of a rumble strip killed somebody, but if someone drove off a lane and didn't notice that it was happening and there was no rumble strip, obviously many of these serious crashes could have been avoided. So that's really what that is based on. And we know that from looking at a lot of reports and also experience, for example, in Texas, they went ahead and improved around 1,000 miles of rural roads very systematically with what was appropriate, and saw a significant reduction in fatal traffic crashes. So that really is getting at the reason we call them crashes and not accidents is accidents implies they're just random and unavoidable, but crashes mean there was a confluence of events and likely mistakes made. But in a forgiving transportation environment, people shouldn't be getting killed because they were distracted or made a mistake.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up, if I could. So in the total annual cost, you had mentioned in the Charlotte region, $1,976 annually per vehicle owner. Did you break those down into the categories? In other words, how much of that was safety related, how much of it was delay, or how much of it vehicle maintenance?
Yes, yeah, and if you look at the report, for example, the cost of driving on rough roads in the Charlotte area is $601, and so that's a subset of the total. And essentially, that estimate is looking at 4 factors. One is accelerated vehicle depreciation. A new vehicle doesn't last as long if you're driving on rough roads. Cumulatively, data and research shows that they wear out that much more quickly. You also see more routine repairs, and you're consuming more gasoline, and your tires wear out that much more quickly. The congestion estimate for the Charlotte metro area is $1,050 annually, and that is largely the cost of lost time, and that data comes from Texas A&M University that looks at it annually, their Transportation Institute, They value time probably around $18, $19 an hour. I bet you most people think their time is far more valuable than that. But again, it's an estimate to monetize it. And then safety is assuming that about a third of the economic cost of traffic crashes in the Charlotte area we can attribute, or to at least a contributing factor, is the roadway safety features. And then we essentially just divide that by the number of motorists in the region. And that adds up to the total.
Thank you.
Denise, this is Jerry. Thank you for the question. Just one piece to add on to your question and Rocky's answer is this congestion model also impacts the investment, the core of it itself, because the greater the congestion, the less reach North Carolina businesses have across the country on how far that distribution network can really travel in a driver's day. And it also restricts the employee's ability to have other opportunities, because if the congestion is so thick, their ability to look at markets for opportunity is greatly compressed. And that's not really fair to the citizen and the families in the state.
Agreed. And that connectivity factor, Jerry, becomes really important as metro areas continue to grow and expand, is being able to offer opportunities for efficient travel outside the broader metro regions. And that becomes, the key for future investment and future jobs, as you mentioned.
Right.
Okay, I don't see any other questions in the queue for Q&A. If there are any other questions, please go ahead and either use the raise hand function to indicate that you'd like to ask a question, or you can drop that again into the Q&A box below.
And certainly my contact information is available on all of the media material and throughout the day for anyone, any journalist working on the story. I'm certainly available for subsequent calls. Carolyn, was that another question that came in?
Oh, I'm sorry, actually, Daniel Pierce would like to ask another question. Daniel, I'll elevate you in just one moment, and then you'll be able to ask your question. So Daniel, you should be able to unmute your line and ask your question.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you again for letting me ask. I do want to see if you guys can address what is the situation on backlog projects to address some of these issues. I know that one stretch of road, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's in the Denton area here in the Triad, and there was a push before the pandemic began to get rumble strips put in the middle lane to help reduce the amount of head-on collisions that happen there. But that project was, of course, put on hold to move any further due to the pandemic and costs. So do we know how many backlog projects there are to address some of these issues, and how long, once we start addressing these issues, will that start to trickle in to impact the pockets of drivers here in North Carolina?
Well, to answer the second part of the question, and perhaps Jerry has more insights at the state level, the important thing with safety improvements is that once a safety improvement is complete, it starts to improve safety immediately. And it's the gift that keeps on giving. So when you improve an intersection, when you add a rumble strip, it's a 1 year, it's a construction project in that time and an investment during that period, but it provides safety benefits for years ahead. The report itself didn't get into the current status of projects by the state or even by local governments. I'm not sure, Jerry, if you have any additional insights of where the state stands.
Sure. So great question, Mr. Pierce. So what a lot of projects, as we know, when the COVID hit and the economic slowdown came in, projects purely based on funding, because it's funding comes from gas tax, which comes from economic activity, dropped way off, and the state had to slow down and delay many projects. I will tell you, Secretary Boyette, very attentive to these type of issues and trying to solve them. inside, I think the Denton area, that's in the DOT 7. So the DOT 7 engineer can probably tell you specifically what is the status and the timing of it. I know here in Winston-Salem, Pat Ivy, the DOT engineer, does a phenomenal job of trying to keep all the projects out on a calendar so the businesses can kind of see where they are on the time delivery and to build that in. But to Rocky's point, especially on safety, once that impact is delivered, the savings and just happens instantaneously with it as far as protecting and taking congestion out. It's one of the things, just, the flag that I give the state a lot of credit. When they started the I-74 implementation, they've already opened up the first 2 legs. It's helping take a little bit of the traffic congestion off 421. And they're trying to, deliver and accelerate, but it all ties to funding. And that's unfortunately is where we are to get these projects and safety. It takes money. And one of the things the TRIP report has highlighted well is that funding mechanism that we've relied on is insufficient. And because of efficiency in cars and other different fuels that cars are using, the outlook to the future is very problematic. So solving that kind of solves the Denton problem at the same time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure.
I believe that covers all of the questions that have been submitted so far. So Rocky, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, well, let's conclude the Zoom call. Like I said, I'm certainly available throughout the day if anyone wants to work back with me for any additional comments or thinks of a question later in the day. Again, thanks to Jerry for participating in our Zoom call today, and each of you for taking the time to participate and call in. Everyone have a great day and be safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Rocky. Thank you, Carolyn.